All right, everyone. Welcome back to the Rich Mind Podcast. And today we're going to dive into the subject of belief. And actually, we're going to put a little bit of a different spin on it. It's going to be maybe something you never really thought about, something to consider today, which is going to be a lot of fun. Greg and I are going to dive into this discussion we've had. This is going to piggyback off of an episode of the mentor of mine, David Neagle. He had an episode, and I will link that up into the show notes. It's been maybe about a month ago or so, depending on when you catch this episode live. But definitely check out that link in the show notes to catch the episode we're referring to. But he talks about in that episode the belief in fear and how your belief in fear or the fear that's going on in your life is keeping you from accomplishing your goals, your dream life, the things you're trying to achieve. And I want to dive into that a little further. I listened to that and I've listened to it several times, that episode. And it's like every time I listen to it, I pick out another nugget of wisdom. So it's the whole idea of the personal development, the whole idea between the Rich Mind podcast and everything else that you're trying to consume out there is you're trying to find wisdom from others that have been there, done that, have kind of figured out some of the different pieces of the puzzle, and then you try to implement those things in your life. And so this piece here, the belief in fear, what does that mean? How does that show up in your life? And Greg and I will go back and forth with some of the examples that we are experiencing or have experienced. And hopefully they'll resonate with you and give you the opportunity to then make some different decisions, because that's the whole point. You have the ability to choose. We've talked about that a lot on this podcast, and you'll hear that a lot in David's message as well, is that that's our greatest gift, is our ability to choose and the ability to make a different choice. So anyways, looking forward to it. Belief in fear. What's your initial thoughts there, Greg?
Yeah, this is going to be a good one. I think I know we all have fear one way or another, whether it's, a 0 or 100. I'm pretty sure everybody's somewhere in the middle, depending on what aspect you're talking about, because this covers every aspect of your life. I think there's a lot of fear in business, relationships, everything, you name it. So, and I want, like, kind of like you said, Randy, like we're all dealing with this. We're not immune to it, especially you and I. So, some things we've maybe conquered, other things we're still working on, other things we're probably on the lower end of that scale of, like, we're really scared and fearful to do X, Y, and Z. And, we're working through that process. So, yeah, it's going to be a good conversation, and we'll kind of see where this one goes.
We'll see where this one goes. That's the beauty of the conversations back and forth. We come up with ideas and then we start, just ping ponging back and forth just to each other, which is always a lot of fun. So the first idea, folks, that I really want you to get through with this concept of your belief in fear is to separate the idea that, well, let me back up a little bit. When we are children or when we are born, we aren't born with fear. We aren't born with any fears at all. They say that the only two fears that we have are the fear of loud noises and the fear of falling. And he describes in this podcast episode, which is a great idea, is that those are really just responses or reactions to a particular event. You're not even really afraid of those things. You just feel them in your body, which just generates that emotion within yourself, which just becomes fear. So if that's the case, then all fears that we have as we grow older are taught to us. So think about the generations that have come before us, and even the generations that are going to be coming after us. If we don't take the responsibility to make different choices, to convey different ideas, different concepts to future generations, nothing's going to change. Same thing that has happened with our grandparents, our great grandparents. If you think back to the challenges that they've had, so we're experiencing some challenges even today. So, but at the same time, how we experience those and how we have those fears, whether we should or shouldn't, is basically a relationship to how we were taught growing up, and that's what I want to get across here in this first part, is that these fears we're taught to fear. So it's like even as a child. So I refer to my grandson a lot. So he's 18 months old. He has no fear, meaning he'll do whatever, stick his finger in the door, touch a hot stove. So he's learning what those things are. So he's not afraid of anything. He's not afraid of walking out in the middle of the street. He's not afraid of anything. He's not afraid of strangers. So all of these things that we've been taught growing up that to be afraid of. Now, the magnitude of that fear, once again, kind of goes back to how you were taught to experience that fear. Sometimes parents or even just your surroundings can be severe with telling you that you have to be afraid. You should be afraid of XYZ to different magnitudes. which is why I think some folks have the ability to kind of push through what seems like would be fearful for others. So, for example, starting a business or even just launching out into a podcast or writing your own book. We've talked about that here on the episodes here in the past. If you're fearful of those things, the question is why? Why are you fearful of those things? And so, the beginning part of this, I just want to say that a lot of it is because of things that you've been programmed through your life from parents, from surroundings, whether it's school, situations that's happened to you in different, surroundings. That's where it all stems from. And so if once you understand that, then you can start to begin the process to begin taking control. And that's what we're really trying to hopefully help you do through this episode today. So, any more thoughts on that beginning process as far as understanding that we're taught how to be fearful, or we're taught that we quote unquote should be fearful of certain things?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I know you mentioned it, kids are relentlessly just unfearful. They, and even as a kid, when 30, 40 years ago when I was a kid, right, it was the same way. And I don't know when that kind of switch, kind of happened in my brain or whatever. But you're right. Like I learned it probably from, my parents, my aunts, my uncles, school teachers, that kind of thing. But a good example of, kids being fearless is when you and I met at a couple of masterminds, and in one of the business masterminds, one of the guys there was saying, here's this 14-year-old kid, he's doing this and this, because he had no fear of the consequences or being judged on YouTube or whatever. He was just, this is how you do it, here's the blueprint, I'm going to do it. And he's creating, say $1 million business, or it doesn't even matter the magnitude of the business. He's going out there and he's doing things that grown adults in the room were like, oh my God, I don't know if I can do that, including myself, of like thinking big and buying a huge business or whatever. And yeah, these kids, they're doing it because they don't have that fear. And I don't know, it's a good question. It's probably like a rhetorical question, but when does that fear show up? And it's going to be different probably for everybody based on, like you said, your surroundings, your teachings, and most likely your parents, because they're probably the biggest influence, in your life, or maybe siblings, just the general family dynamic. But yeah, it's real interesting because you do follow your family's beliefs and fears. And unless you break away, like David Neagle talks about, and like we're talking about now, if you want to break away, if it's not something that you want to follow, it can be challenging, and it's a lot of work.
It is a lot of work, but it's definitely rewarding to get in that
Mm-hmm.
driver's seat. So once again, a lot of the things we talk about here on this podcast, I didn't know any of these, and I've had to discover them on my own. It's fun for me to try to articulate them as we hit record. It's fun for me to try to kind of figure them out in my mind, because that's what I do. I hear a concept or hear an idea, and I try to think through, okay, how do I implement this in my life now, like in that moment, whatever that moment is. And this is one of those times. So the initial thought that I had that I wanted to share with you today, as far as like, okay, so if fear is, it's not necessarily real, it's a warning sign. So we need fear. We need to have that alert system. But your mind and your brain, that's only purpose is to keep you alive. So it doesn't understand what a true fear is for, being chased by, you talk about, they always talk about being chased by a saber-toothed tiger back in the day. Yeah, that would be fearful. If you're out in the woods and you've got a grizzly bear chasing after you, yeah, you need to be fearful. You need to be moving in a different direction very quickly, or else obviously you're going to be consumed by that bear. But the point being is that, so what is real versus what is just a perceived fear? So being able to separate the two has been the challenge for myself. What I've discovered through the process of working on myself is that when a fear shows up, I'll get triggered. It triggers an emotion within me. Sometimes my mind will begin to race. I will immediately go to a false future that I've created a picture in my mind that is nowhere near, could be true or is true. It's just a negative future. Sometimes I'll begin to have an emotional, like I'll start to sweat, or my palms will sweat, or headaches sometimes will come on. So when I get triggered like that, what I've had to understand is that I've got to separate myself from that thought in that moment. I've got to take conscious responsibility, take responsibility for that thought, and realize that at that moment, it's in control of me. That thought is completely in control of me, control of the way I'm feeling, control of the way I'm thinking, control of the way I'm actually going to be doing whatever the next processes are. So if there's steps to the process, you made reference to this real estate deal, and let's just use real estate maybe as today as the example. So if you have the desire to move forward with, I don't care how big the building is or how big the investment is. I don't care if it's a single family all the way up to a multi hundreds of units. It doesn't matter. The point is that at any level there, you're going to run up into this fear. So if one unit is no big deal to you, then maybe a duplex would be, maybe a quad would be, maybe a 10 unit building would be. So when you run up to whatever that fear is for you, separating them, pulling it out. I've mentioned it in the past that it's almost like an outer body experience. You can just separate yourself, or I try to separate myself in the moment from the thought, from the idea, from the fear. And when I have the ability to do that, that slows everything down to the point where I can start asking different questions. So the biggest question is, where are those ideas? Where do the solutions come from? And they come from your imagination. But if you have an overactive imagination towards a false future, that's where you're going to get locked up in this fear. And the fear then will keep you crippled from moving forward, when in reality, all you have to do is just take the next logical step. Anyways, any thoughts on that, Greg? Did I articulate that well? Anything you
Yeah.
want to piggyback off there?
Yeah, very well. The one thing that you kind of hit on, and I've heard this explained as more of an intellectual fear, as opposed to, you talk about the saber-toothed tiger, that's a survival fear, or whatever you want to call it, because yeah, if a tiger or somebody or something like that is going to come after you, yeah, that's life or death. But intellectual fear is what we're talking about, with doing a big deal or asking the guy or girl out and you're afraid to get rejected, that kind of thing. Fear of success, fear of failure. It's like you said, it's all in your mind and your beliefs. So to separate them out, like you're talking about, and logically think about, where is this coming from? Is this true? That kind of thing. And one of the things that David Neagle, he mentioned on the podcast, and I wrote it down, he basically said, fear stops people from them changing their direction and getting a different result. And that's the result that you want. So you know what you want, but fear is not allowing you to pivot or to take that first baby step of doing whatever you need to do. And you're right, identifying where that fear is coming from and just kind of like asking yourself logically, if I don't do this, what's going to happen? If I do this, what's going to happen? And where do I want to go? And you can kind of, we can kind of take this conversation into the comfort zone and getting uncomfortable. But if you don't take that step, you're going to feel really comfortable. It's very familiar because that's where you land. That's where you've always been. But if you want to make those changes and make those strides for achievement, you have to get out of your comfort zone and really address those intellectual fears and ask yourself those questions that you were, referring to about beliefs and where they're coming from.
Love that. So most people, and this isn't you listening to us today, but most people in your environment are craving certainty. They're craving a vanilla life. They want to wake up at the same time. They want to do the same things every day. They want to have their routines. Whether they're good or bad, that's up for debate. That's not for you to decide, nor me. But they just want certainty throughout their day. And that's fine if that's what they choose. But if you're listening to us today, and obviously you are, and we appreciate you being here. If you're listening to us today and you're trying to figure out different ways of being, you want to take control of your thoughts. You want to then take control of your responses to get a different result, then understand that you don't need certainty. You don't need it at all, because you have the ability to then think. So two things I want to bring to the podcast, and I want to, so make a note of this, Greg, and is for a future episode, that I want to go into the universal laws. There are 7 universal laws that if you begin to think in those ways, your life then, it almost seemingly begins to fall into place. So it's accurate thinking versus chaotic certainty type thinking. It's two different things. So 2 of the laws that I want to cover today that go along with this belief in the fear is the law of polarity and the law of cause and effect. And you may or might not have be familiar with either one of those. And like I said, there's 7 total, so there's 5 more, and we won't go into those today. But let's talk about the law of polarity. And the law of polarity says that everything has an equal and opposite. So every up has a down, every right has a left, every inside has an outside, every good has a bad. So every fear has a belief in the positive. So if you're fearful about something, there's also the positive side of that as well. So the issue that we have is that when something appears to be negative in our life, so we're using the fear as a negativity in our life, we attach a meaning to that through our experiences. As I mentioned at the beginning, some of those experiences come from our relationships, whether it's our family, whether it's our school systems, whatever it comes from. We are taught those fears. But the flip side of that is that because of that fear, or because of that perceived negativity, there's also the flip side that it could be a positive, or that it is a positive. And so it's just a matter, once again, of separating yourself from that negative fear and pulling yourself in or putting yourself in a position to then begin to think more accurately, which then brings us into the law of cause and effect. Everything that we do, there's a cause and effect. So it's, if you didn't necessarily get the perceived or the result that you're looking for, you need to think through the cause of why you got that particular result at that moment. And it's not good or bad. It just is. One thing I say a lot around my house, right, is I try to take away labels. I try to take away good or bad, especially those two. And I just try to say a lot that everything just is. And when you kind of put that in perspective and kind of think about that for a second, you realize that it's those labels that make things good or bad. And if you can think about in a way of, okay, if I want to get X result, so we're talking about the real estate here today, and you get fearful of, oh my gosh, I don't know, have any idea. Where am I going to get the money? Who do I need to talk to? What town do I need to go to first? What, I mean, you can just go down a negative rabbit trail. And that fear is going to keep you stuck. That fear is going to keep you from moving forward instead of you realize you get triggered, separating yourself from that trigger and start then with the cause and effect. So if you have the desire for this visual of this property, I don't care how big it is, you decide. What's the first step you need to do? I don't know what that answer is. That's where that information is going to be given to you. You're going to come up with the idea. Your imagination is going to begin to go to work on the solution versus focusing on the problem or focusing on the fear, which is going to keep you inactive. So those two universal laws, the law of polarity, the law of cause and effect, once I've learned those for myself as well. Now, admittedly, I'm not perfect at them every single day, but I'm actively working on it every single day. I have had different situations even in the last week or two that have shown up in my life, opportunities for me to step into that have led me instantly into, okay, I start fearing, okay, what if I don't do it well? Or what happens if this happens? Or, you know what I mean? So I start going down that rabbit trail in my mind, and I've had to stop myself. Now, it might take, when I say stop, it's like it might take a few days to really just get calm with yourself, to calm down that chatter, trying to get you to slow down, to get you to stop. Journaling about it helps me a lot. I talk about it a lot with my wife. I'll even talk about it with Greg sometimes when we're offline. But the point is that once you get control of it, then you can think from an accurate thinking of cause and effect. Is okay, I want this to happen. So I want these opportunities that are coming into my life. I want to make them real. Well, what's the first thing I need to do? Start there. Don't worry about step 5, 10, 20. Just start with the first step, and the other steps will start revealing themselves to you as you begin down that process. Any thoughts, man?
Yeah, I love that. That was great. Yeah, great content right there. And I'll start with the polarity because that was a new law. I've only heard that from David Neagle, and I think you turned me on to him maybe like a year ago. So I never heard that before. So that was really cool. And then kind of tying this into, Tony Robbins, who is top of mind for me in the last, couple months here. He kind of talks about the same thing, but he doesn't mention those specific words. But I'll give the audience 3 things that he kind of goes over. So kind of like some action steps or maybe questions to ask yourself as like an exercise. So he starts with, what are you going to focus on? And we experience the life that we focus on. So kind of like you're saying, if you're focusing on the fear and not on the potential outcome, what could this turn into? It could be amazing. Successful people, they have fear, but they act anyway. And unsuccessful people, they have that fear, but they don't act, or they act very, very small, or they'll give themselves excuses on not to do something. And then the whole idea dream just kind of fades away and doesn't really happen. And the next thing that he talks about is, what does it mean? And you kind of touched on this as well. The meaning we give our thoughts creates our emotions, and our emotions create our actions. And that leads into the third step is, what are you going to do? What action are you going to take? Like you said, what's that first step that you need to take? It doesn't have to be a huge step, but it has to be a step in the right direction. Who do I need to contact, or who has done this before that I could pick their brain, because they probably have the same fear. Maybe it was last week or 10 years ago when they were buying their first property. And then you can talk to that person and say, hey, I'm really feeling fearful, but I know I want to do this and achieve this outcome. Can you talk me through this? And again, that kind of goes back to, who in your network, who in your life can you reach out to? So kind of combined a few things there, but yeah, the law of polarity, Tony Robbins kind of has a few different ways of spinning it, but I think those three kind of questions to ask yourself will help some people move forward and act anyway in spite of fear, because that's what, like we said, we all have fear. Some people act, some people don't, and that's the deciding factor, in my opinion, of if you're going to be successful or if you're going to go back to familiarity.
The label of right or wrong or making a mistake, once again, it's something that we are taught growing up, going through the school system in particular. We get grades for activities versus just learning from them. It's unfortunate. I struggled with the idea of, okay, if I can't do it correctly, if I can't, or what is correctly, if I can't do it to an A standard, let's just say in the school system, then why do it at all? That's kind of the mindset that I had for the longest time, which kept me, once again, playing very small in my life. I've had to realize that with these different universal laws, and then taking control, getting in the driver's seat, understanding that these thoughts and ideas and these fears and these beliefs are happening, but getting into the driver's seat, understanding that I don't need certainty. I just need the ability to make a different choice. I need to have the ability to then think through them on a conscious level and make a different choice and move forward, keep moving forward. I've used the example with the podcast. There's been several times where I've run up to a little bit of a roadblock, meaning I didn't know exactly which direction I wanted to take the podcast. Each time when I've sat with that versus just shutting it down, the next opportunity came. This time it was bringing Greg on as a co-host, which has been a fantastic experience. I've been able to then share the stage with someone that, number one, we enjoy each other. We're able to go back and forth having conversations just like that. But the point I want to make, though, is I didn't let the fear of, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? Oh my gosh, how do I move forward? I don't know anybody. I started this this podcast with zero people. Like, nobody knew me. Nobody knows me. No, I don't have a list. I don't have everybody goes out there, go build a list and go build a this and go this. And I'm like, I started it with zero, double zero. And and I'm not saying, I'm not bragging, saying that I'm great or anything like that. But the point is that I didn't allow that fear of, oh my gosh, how am I going to move forward when I don't have anybody to speak to? One thing, and this is just a little bit of a side tangent, but more on the podcast part of it, is that a mentor of mine a couple years ago before I launched, he said, what if you knew for a fact that you would have 2 to 5 people show up every single week for a live talk that you were going to give? If you're scheduled to show up for a live talk and only 2 or 5 people showed up into the audience, would you still show up? Do you think that would be meaningful? That was the question he gave to me. Yeah. And that's exactly, I was like, yeah, I need to show up. So it doesn't matter if 0 show up. It doesn't matter if 1 shows up. It doesn't matter if 1,000,000 show up. The point is that you just have to move through that fear. You've got to understand and make it bigger than yourself. I'm actually in the process of producing the episode right now. I was talking about my friend Mike and how he he had this amazing ability to just keep moving forward, to do things that I thought were so big. He's just a larger than life type human. He always seemed to accomplish all kinds of things. And I asked him that one time, like, how do you do all this? And he goes, I just step into it and I figure it out. It's not that he didn't have the fear. He just stepped into the fear. He understood that the fear wasn't going to keep him from achieving whatever goal he was setting out to achieve. And it wasn't a smooth road every single time. He would have roadblocks, but he would continue to move forward. And it was always amazing for me to watch him in real time, because he was a neighbor of mine, achieve great things, which was a lot of fun. He was a great influence on my family, my kids. They were in that, I want to say, preteen age when he was in our life. And it was fun he was pumping them up. My kids were coming home giddy at times, just excited about life and excited about trying things that I needed to get better at those things for myself as I've trying to pursue the achievements that I want to achieve. But folks, just understand that this belief, your belief and your fear. So when the fear happens, if you let it consume you, if you let it control you, that's the belief I'm talking about. You've got to take a conscious choice, a conscious effort to separate from that fear. Understand what it is. It's a warning of a future that, yeah, it might be a little uncertain to you, but it doesn't mean you can't solve it. It with AI these days, I told my wife the other day, with AI these days, information is like you can find out anything about literally anything. Anything. If you don't know how to use AI, reach out to me. I want to teach you because it's the most amazing thing. You want to build something, you want to create something, you want to think through a brainstorm session. We were doing that for my wife's business. We were talking about, she's a wedding planner and event coordinator. I was talking to the AI and it was giving me some ideas. It gave us probably 3 or 4 things that Stacy, my wife, she's looked at me and goes, wow, I never thought of that before. And exactly. It's amazing. The point being is that there's nothing to be fearful. You don't need to be afraid of it. A lot of people right now are afraid that AI is going to take over the world. Well, it will if you allow it, but you can use it's a tool. You can use it just like cars are a tool. I'm sure that back in the day, the horse and buggy people were all up in arms that, oh my gosh, we can't allow this car to take over. It's a tool, just like AI is a tool. Man, that was a long-winded tangent right there. Save me, Greg, or save the audience. Hopefully you've stayed with us so far, folks. But the point is I just want you to understand that the fear of keeping you moving forward, take control, take responsibility. And when you do that, separate yourself through the processes that we've been talking lately here on the podcast, you're going to set yourself up for a completely different life. And I know that's true because that's exactly what's happened for me. I'm speaking from experience. Anyways, what else
Yeah.
you have, Greg?
No, that was great. I mean, just to kind of piggyback off of that, I think it was the Tony Robbins who mentioned something like this, but he says you're the creator of your own life, not the manager of your circumstances.
Say that
And
again. That was good. Let me ponder that one more time. Please say that again.
you are the creator of your own life, not the manager of your circumstances. So to me, that means, decide what you want to focus on, like we're talking about here. When fear shows up, it can be positive or negative, the law of polarity, that kind of thing. And it could be both. There could be a little bit of negative fear. Oh, this is uncomfortable. But then you also see the positive side. And then, like you said, you lean into it and you move forward and, you have that support around you that can help you kind of walk through that a little bit. And like you said, you don't have to go 100 miles an hour and, jump off the cliff. You can just take those baby steps and to alleviate that fear a little bit, but also achieve that goal, depending on what the goal is. But yeah, I think deciding on what you want to focus on, what side of the coin, that's a huge first step. So yeah, so I think that kind of wraps it up for me anyway. But I love that the last portion that you said. It really drove it home.
Appreciate that, man. So one thing I'm trying to do, and I'll leave this for you today, leaving us on this episode, and something I'm actively trying to do, an exercise. So it's a mental exercise. It's a thought exercise. It's something that I'm not good at yet, but I'm going to actively work on doing it. I've grown up and I would consider myself pessimistic, meaning I'm usually always seeing negative things first. It's kept me away from some negative things happening in my life, whether it's investments, whether it's friendships, whether it's whatever. But I will tell you that it also has kept me away from some fantastic things also. And I would probably venture to believe, as I'm learning this for myself, that it's probably kept me away from more good than it's kept me away from the bad. That's what I'm learning. And that's where I can't change the past, but what I can do is I can change today. And if I change today, that's going to obviously change my future. So what I'm going to try to do, or what I am doing actively, is I'm trying to find and look for the good in things, no matter what. Whether it's I get triggered. So I'll get triggered, and we've talked about in the past, I would get triggered by what somebody might say, some things that are going on possibly in the economy, something like that. I'll get triggered. I'm actively trying to find out where that's coming from, number one, and then look for the positive side, the positive spin on that, whatever that emotion that's coming up, which then will allow me then to take a different action. And it's those different actions is what's going to give me the different result. and it's probably going to be the result that I want. The good news is if I get it, so the result that I get, even if it's not necessarily the exact result that I'm looking for, I can then make a different choice. That's the beauty of it, is you're in the driver's seat. That's where it starts to get to be a little bit fun. At least it is for me. It's challenging. Like you said, it is work. It's if you become an active participant in your life, which once again, if you're listening to us today, and if you've gotten to this far in this episode, you're doing it. And congratulations. Most people are not. Most people are just drifting through life, floating on a sea of nothingness, looking and searching for certainty that isn't there. They don't want change. They're afraid of change. They're afraid of all kinds of things in their life, but they don't even realize that they're in control. They can create the life that they want. They have the ability to choose, just like you, just like me. We all have it. It's the ability then to just take it, use it, harness it, and believe in yourself. Believe in a positive outcome instead of the negative, which is what I want to leave with you here today. So, yeah, I think you said you had it, and that was wrapping it up for yourself there, Greg. One last thing. Is there anything else that before we leave these folks today? It's been, yeah, I love these types of conversations. It's so much fun.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I would just say I think you kind of summed it up really well. But go back and listen to this episode if because I listened to episodes that you mentioned. You listened to the David Neagle episode a few times. I did the same thing because you do pick up other aspects that you maybe weren't focusing on or paying attention to. So this one, we don't say this very often, but yeah, re-listen to this episode or rewatch this one. I'm really maybe even take some notes on it, journal about it. If you're serious about making those changes and leaning into the fear and getting out of that or that familiar space that you're in, yeah, that would be my recommendation: is go back and re-listen and really make an exercise out of this one.
Love it, man. Appreciate it. Appreciate you coming on and sharing your wisdom. It's always so much fun. So, folks, if you enjoyed this one, share it with your family and friends. That would help us spread the message of the Rich Mind podcast. Help us get it to as many people as possibly can. I'm just on a mission of trying to help as many people as I possibly can that are either stuck, that are looking for different ways. They know in their heart or they know in their being that there is a different way, but they're just not sure how. I'm trying to take the things that I'm learning in real time that I've accumulated over the last 10, 12 ish years. And I'm trying to just share it with you in a different way, maybe sharing some personal stories. Hopefully, maybe it'll resonate with you a little bit more. And if it is, just like I said, share it with somebody, share it with your family, share it with your friends. We would greatly appreciate that. Head over to info@richmind.co and leave us a message there as well. Reach out to us if you have any questions, have any concerns, give us some feedback. Are you liking the pivots that I've made on the podcast so far? Are you hating them? Whatever it is. Remember, law of polarity, good, bad, there isn't it. There just is. There's just information. And we'll take that information into consideration as we keep moving forward with the podcast, which leads us into the next episode. So we touched on it a little bit today, but we're going to talk a little bit more about taking responsibility and why that's so important and what you need to do then to take more responsibility for your own life. That's going to be the conversation we're going to have on the next episode. It's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to carry over right from what we're talking about here today. We'll go a little bit deeper, share some stories. It's going to be a lot of fun. So go out there, have a fantastic day. Thank you for joining us here on the episode today. And we'll look forward to coming back with that next episode very soon. Until then, bye now.